heard a noise. I think it was the quail block being dropped, and I like spun and was shining my light in that direction because I heard this dove block fall, boom, and footsteps. Somebody ran past me, just a few feet to my right. They ran past me to the fence behind me. Somebody runs to my right, within a couple of feet of me, thump, 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 like it's a biped, it's a person, right? And then I hear the fence behind me, like someone hit it, like bang, but then I heard nothing after that. So I thought he probably ran into the fence and then kind of like dropped, and the other person like ran the other direction. So I heard two footfalls, and I'm holding this light, and I presume they thought I could see them, but I could see nothing.
I never felt scared. I didn't feel scared at all. I felt in awe. I was completely in awe. I thought this was a rock, and it's this beautiful, soft-moving thing. Like, I had no idea what it was. I could tell it was alive, whatever it was, but it didn't fit anything that I had in my mind to label it. I was absolutely captivated and mesmerized by the shiny glistening of the hair. It was saying sparkly is going too far, but it was absolutely glistening, like with depth. It had depth of color, like something that you would pay a lot of money for if you went to get your hair done. That's what it looked like. It was beautiful.
So I'm Edward, and this is Tia.
Hi.
Hi. I'm Matt.
A little nervous.
We've never done this before, so thanks for having us on your show.
Hey, I've never done this either, so we're all in the same boat. So
all right,
everything's good. How are you guys?
We're doing well. We were just reflecting. Tia's only told her story to a couple of people. I've told my little stories a couple of times. Some of our friends.
Yeah.
But yeah. I'm looking forward to her telling her story.
Both of you sounds like have interesting stories, but between the two of you, it kind of makes for a really interesting story. You know, Ed, you had some things that you said that kind of struck a chord with me that I found really interesting. So I really wanted to have you guys on. So I really appreciate you having the patience and everything and agreeing to come on and do this with me.
Oh, thanks.
Excellent. We're excited.
Yeah, we're honored. This will be fun.
Just start at the beginning and, kind of just walk us through it.
Yeah. Okay. So I was married at the time to my ex. He was just a staunch skeptic about all these things, and he was a police officer for the city. And we were returning from northern Arizona. I remember it was cold. It was like winter months, so I think it was like December. And we were returning in the dead of night in my little sedan. We had a sedan at the time. And just driving around, it was kind of like on the passenger side of the car, there was just this big cliff, like a big, kind of a mountain that had been blasted to make room for the highway. And the highway was so small, it was only 2 lanes where, you had to be real careful. You're going around, all these blind corners and curving, and there's one pathway, for oncoming traffic, and the other is for you. And then on the driver's side was just this vast plains, just kind of like grassy plains. It was really dark. I just remember, no moon was out. It was very, very dark. And it's probably like, I don't know, 1:30 in the morning. We were making this trip back home. And we were going around this blind corner, and we come to a stop because there's this enormous blonde boulder in the road. And the boulder is so big it takes the whole width of the car. And to give you an idea, it's a Malibu, an older Malibu. And it was the width of the entire hood. And so we literally come right up to this boulder, and it's right at the curve of this blind corner. So we sat there in the car, just kind of came to a complete stop. And keep in mind there's no power out there. There's no other vehicles out there. There's no street lights out there. So it was completely black, and the only power is what your car is generating in the high beams. So we had our high beams on. So we come right up to this boulder with our high beams on. The boulder's just, about maybe a foot max from the hood of the car, and just stop. And we kind of like in the midst of crap, what do we do? Do we take the chance of, going around the boulder into oncoming traffic on this blind corner where there could be, a traveler coming the opposite direction and risk a head-on collision in the middle of nowhere where you don't have any help, or, what are we going to do? And right at that moment, the boulder sighed. It literally, and it's not that I heard it because our windows are up and it's really frigid cold outside, but this whole boulder moved like like this huge like if you were sitting on top of a person's chest and they just had this big inhale and exhale, this thing just sighed like it was miffed, and then it slowly got up, and it was on all fours. And do you remember, like, I always try to use this explanation. The only thing I can think of is, those AT-AT robotic
yes,
machines from Star Wars,
yes.
Right? So it had it was a very flat back. It had, it was on all fours, and I can't, how like a horse, a dog, a cat, everybody's got a haunch. Most animals we can relate to have some haunch or some butt with a tail. This did not have a haunch. It looked like it was walking on 4 long arms, no tail. And what was so striking, and again, this wasn't like a smear on the windshield or like, oh, it's, foggy on the inside. No, this was like, we kept our car immaculately clean. This was in high beams, just a foot away from the hood of the car. And this thing gets up and it starts walking slowly on all 4 arms. And it was covered in, there's absolutely no fur. It was completely hair, long, 18-inch, beautiful, freshly combed hair, strawberry blonde, and shiny, very shiny, like you'd see something out of a Pantene commercial. And what was incredible was it looked absolutely solid in high beams in our car. It looked just like a rock. And the second it got up from the roadway and started walking, that's where you could see all of the beautiful hair just like moving with the body. But what was so interesting was there was no haunch, and there wasn't that, how dogs have that extra kind of like a heightened heel. Cats have that. There wasn't that at all. It was just a straight leg, just like if you were walking on your arms, 4 of them. Long 18-inch golden blonde, like strawberry blonde hair, like a Pantene commercial, perfectly groomed. And we watched this thing transverse like the width of the car, and all I could see when I'm looking at the head end is there was absolutely no neck. It was, all I could see was like a bump where the forehead would be, but the whole head was like sunken into the chest cavity, like the interior of your clavicle. There was no neck stem. It was just like a sunken head bump, like on the head end. But obviously my ex could see the head area a little better than I could. All I could see was like the part of like the forehead kind of sticking out. And then it literally just walked off slowly into the darkness, completely disappeared. I couldn't even see it once it got into the dark fields, but there's nothing out there. It's just acreage after acreage, no buildings, no vehicles, no people, no lights. It's just endless plains. And even looking past his head, out of his window, I could not see it once it reached the dark plains area. It was just gone. And I'm looking at him, and he's just, his eyes are as big as saucers. And he slowly turns to me and he says, "Let us never speak of this again." And we slowly accelerated and went around the blind corner, and he would never speak about it, ever. He just could not muster understandably so. I'm sure we've all been through that, where you try to, share the unusual things that you've seen. That explains there's a lot of things, outside of our reality that we, feel comfortable talking about and can be threatening to some. So he literally could not comprehend what he saw. He couldn't talk about it. And I wanted to ask him, like, did you see the face? Did you see the face? And he just would not speak at all. He absolutely adamantly would not speak. And we didn't talk. We had a 3-hour drive. We didn't speak a word after that. He literally was like focusing on driving and breathing. That's poor guy. I kind of felt bad for him after that, but that always stuck with me. I had no idea what I saw. I made the mistake of sharing the story with a good friend of mine who's, has difficulty hearing this kind of esoteric side of things, and was adamant I saw a bear. And I'm like, no, I know what a bear looks like. We all know what a bear looks like. There was no snoots. There was no, how even when like a bear has a gait, you'll actually see a distinguished, like a gait pattern in the shoulder blades, or you'll see that it's very distinguished. You'll even see like fat packs, like, there's some fat padding on a bear, and you'll see that moving. It was completely flat. And it moved much like an at, just 4 long, very long arms, no fur at all, no tail, and no neck. And had this thing stood up, and what was funny was I never shared the story with anybody because you're kind of nervous about it at first, so who would take you seriously. When I met Edward, that was one of the first things I told him, and his eyes got all big. He's like, that sounds like a Sasquatch. I think you saw a Bigfoot. And I'm like, really? I'm like, this is always just not at me. Like, I want to know what I saw, because it definitely wasn't anything I'd ever seen. It definitely wasn't a wolf. Had this thing stood up, it would have easily cleared 8 feet. Easily. It was just lots of leg. The back itself was like the width of the car, and absolutely beautiful hair. I was mesmerized. I was just literally mesmerized by what we thought was solid, and then as it moved, it was flowing and shiny and strawberry blonde and about 18 inches long hair, just straight, kind of like what you'd expect off of, like a beautiful show dog. Like those really long, I don't even know what kind I'm thinking of, but they're blonde. They've really long, beautiful hair that's been groomed and groomed and groomed for, maybe an hour or something, but beautiful. So it looked solid. And then as soon as it sighed and started moving, it wasn't. And then it just, we never spoke of it again. He couldn't bring himself to talk about that further. So
first off, wow. So I saw something down in Texas one time, and I would count it as a Bigfoot sighting, but the problem was I never saw the head. I couldn't see the head. And that was the one thing that has always kept me from saying, that was a Bigfoot, because if I saw the head, I could definitely identify it. But the thing that I saw was not gigantic by any means. If it was a Bigfoot, it was definitely a young juvenile. It was on all fours at the time, and its back would have probably been around 3 feet off the ground, maybe at the most. Probably not even that. Probably not even 3 feet. It was dark in color. At the closest point, I was probably only, maybe 30 feet. And it was during the daytime, but it was just where it was like going down this trail, and I was out there looking for Bigfoot with a group of people. That was another problem. And but it was always like at this angle behind the trees where I couldn't see its head, and I was trying to move, and it was moving as I was moving, and the angle was just always wrong. But a couple things. Its back was completely flat. The head did not stick up like above the back, really. It didn't have haunches. It didn't have a tail, and it looked like the front arms, for lack of a better word, and the back legs were they seemed fairly uniform in size, like it was running on 4 arms, like you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
it
cool.
didn't run like a bear. It didn't, it didn't move like a bear at all. And that's one that's just like always really stuck with me. And here you are, talking about little minute details that are exactly the same as what I saw and have tried to explain to people. And that's the same thing that I've heard from many other people who have witnessed these things and been able to identify them whenever they've seen them on all fours and not standing upright, especially the flat back thing. That's one of the key things that people, describe seeing, but unless you see it for yourself, I don't think people really understand it. Because like with a bear or just about any other animal that is designed to be on four legs,
Mm-hmm.
their shoulder blades like stick up whenever they walk.
Right.
They're not squared shoulders like a person is. And this thing that I saw had square shoulders, and it didn't have shoulder blades sticking up out of the back, moving with its forward limbs as it moved. And it didn't have that extended heel like canines and felines have that you were talking about. All very similar, except color and size and length of hair are basically the only differences. Like whenever you saw it on all fours as it moved, how high was its back in compared to the front end of the vehicle?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say 17 inches, 16 inches, something like that, taller, just the back above the hood. And it's a sedan. So whatever that is from the ground.
What animal could it have been? Considering where you were at the time, and the size, the only animals that it could even fall into that category of that size would have been instantly recognizable to you.
Right.
And I'm not saying this like, I definitely think you saw a Bigfoot. I just want to say that, but I'm just for the benefit of people listening, and the type of questions that people would have. That's why I'm asking those questions. I mean, obviously there's nothing, geez, maybe like some muskox or something would have hair that long and be that size. Like very, very limited group of animals here that we're talking about.
Right. And out in the plains, like just to clarify too, I just remember kind of looking out that direction and seeing there were no trees at all. It was literally just grass, like kind of, like fall, winter grass where it's turning golden kind of thing. But it's like, at the time we were only like familiar with that area because we were driving there earlier in the morning, but driving home from that area, it was just vast plains of just that brush. That's it. I don't even remember seeing like big bushes or any sort of, no trees at all. And the other thing that kind of made sense was what kind of makes me laugh is that it was so cold. I remember we were just really cold in the car, even though we had the heater on, but it wasn't working that great. And, whatever it was obviously, sleeping in the roadway that was asphalt that probably had harbored some heat from, the sun earlier that day and had fallen asleep or was comfy or something. But it was, the funniest part was that you could tell it was like, fine, I'll move. Like it was irritated because it was like, like fine, dumb humans in my way.
Yeah, I was comfortable.
I was comfy, and you could tell it. I mean, whatever it was, it looked relaxed and natural, but it looked completely solid. We thought it was a boulder, and I remember thinking like that boulder, because what I can see in like the high beams, that boulder was blonde, and it's not matching any of the rocks on the passenger side. The rocks are like kind of a, like a typical brownish, a little bit of red in it, but it doesn't match the color. Like, where did that thing come from? Where did that fall from? And then you're kind of wondering, something going to fall in the car, and then you realize, oh, that's not a rock.
You described the hair as being like a kind of a golden strawberry blonde.
Yes. Beautiful.
Would you compare it to the color of like straw or dead grass?
No, it had more, it was a strawberry blonde. It wasn't like a straight blonde. It literally had a little bit of red to it. and it was shiny like what you'd expect in like a Pantene commercial, like that, like really beautiful. I was literally stricken by what the heck is that? Because it definitely was not furry. It was just hair, lots and lots of long hair too. And the hair it looked like someone had literally combed this being for hours. It was freshly groomed, like beautifully groomed. And that's what was so striking. You could just see, in the high beams too, it was just, you could see each kind of like, hair can kind of clump and long. Just think of like a woman's long hair. As she moves, you can see the clumps kind of like going, fluid, like a fluid motion that's going with the body, that's walking. Kind of, that's what was so striking, was we were at, this looked just like a boulder, a solid rock in our high beams, and then suddenly it was soft and moving. And I was just, what? You step back a second, just what am I looking at? And I had never had an experience like that before, so I didn't know what to think that was. But it definitely was not a bear.
I talked to a guy from Florida who actually just randomly struck one of these with his vehicle. And but he just clipped it. It was jumping. It had to like kind of jump over his hood, if I remember. It was trying to clear the vehicle, and it was just a little short, and he just barely clipped it. It got away. It was fine, apparently. But he described the hair in a very similar way to what you're describing.
Wow. Even with the strawberry part, the reddish, little bit of red?
I think his was more of a reddish brown, but the way that the hair flowed and everything, it really stood out to him.
Wow.
And a lot of people have said things about their hair having certain properties to them that maybe help with them camouflaging themselves and stuff like that. And I'm wondering if that might be true, since in both instances, the thing was being viewed in the headlights of a car. And I'm wondering if the light played off of it a certain way, and that's why it was so striking, like you're describing. And the well-groomed, Pantene commercial, like, you're certainly not the first person I've heard describe it that way either.
Oh, wow. Cool.
I've heard it ranges. A lot of people, have definitely said like, oh, its hair was all matted looking and stuff. But I have heard numerous witnesses talk about it looked like, what you would expect, like in a hair commercial, like it just sat there brushing its hair out all day or something.
Yeah.
There was one male Bigfoot that was being seen here in Oklahoma at a famous casino that some people might be familiar with. And some of the people that saw that one described it as almost handsome, the way that its hair looked and everything, the way that it was well groomed. And they wondered if the others, maybe the females, had been taking care of it.
That's cute.
Edward, whenever you heard this story, man, your jaw must have hit the floor. What did you think?
It did. Well, okay, so this was years. We got together in 2016, and this was early on in our relationship. One of the things that brought us together was being able to talk about topics like this. And I think the first, I remember showing her the video "Everything You Know Is Wrong" by Lloyd Pye.
Mm-hmm.
It's like one of the first things that we watched together. Anyways, she did not know she'd seen a Bigfoot, and I wasn't sure, but I at least knew that they could walk on all fours, so that got us talking about it. And I just wanted to interject a minute ago when she was describing it. It's like every time she's talked about the hair, like she's doing all these hand signals to show the hair flowing left and right. Nobody sees that but me.
I talk with my hands.
Yeah, so I wanted to at least with her hands, she's trying to say that they were going, but the hair was swinging left and right as it was walking. Is that true?
Kind of like, yeah, it was like long and like wavy, but not tight waves. Very kind of like a Pantene commercial. Like they're not tight waves, but long. Kind of like if you took a bunch of spaghetti and you hung it, and then you're moving the spaghetti and it's all waving together like that, in a walking pattern. That length. kind of.
And did you say it was 18 inches long?
It's about 18 inches long.
That is super long.
It's crazy long. Like, yeah, beautiful.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was wild. Anyway, so you want to share yours?
Yeah, so I've got some stories too, but I hadn't ever seen one. Did you have any other questions for Tia about her sighting? Because I've never seen one.
Yeah, a million, of course. But I mean, it's fine. I always have questions. Anytime, whenever somebody else has seen one, no offense, Edward, but I'm just saying it's like a thing where hearing their stories help validate what I've witnessed and makes me feel better, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And that's why I'm so appreciative of people like yourselves coming on here and sharing your stories, because I'm hoping that other people who have encountered things and had experiences, it helps them just hearing other people talk about it, even if they're not ready to talk about it. I mean, I guess just a couple more quick questions, and then we'll hear Edward's stories. Before you saw this thing, I mean, was Bigfoot something that you thought about? Were you into anything paranormal? Had you had experiences with paranormal things and things of that nature before this?
I have. They weren't Bigfoot related, but I've seen a skinwalker.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, that's a whole nother story. That was at my folks' house, and I was 9. That was like, boy. Have you ever felt that you were so terrified, you were paralyzed with fear?
Sure, yeah. Unfortunately.
I literally felt like, I remember as a kid, I was always kind of like older than I was physically old. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
So I remember even at 9 feeling like my heart had stopped seeing this thing, because that's a whole nother story. But yeah, I'd never seen anything Bigfoot related. So I'd only heard about Bigfoot, but I'd never gone, down that rabbit hole or done any research on my own, or, and I had other experiences like through, just at my family's house. They also grew up I grew up in a home that was basically embedded in the foothills. So there was a lot of interesting history to the land. And a lot of mountains around you, not a lot of trees, just beautiful like desertscape mountains. I used to dig up arrowheads in the backyard, kind of thing. So there were things that my parents would describe that they saw that was odd. So they lived at like the foothills of these mountains, and this was also in Arizona, and they used to go walking every morning in what they call a canyon. And the canyon's just kind of like this neighborhood pathway before it was all built up with a bunch of homes. But they would just go up in this loop that would take, it was about like maybe, 3-mile walk. And they would go up into the mountains and they would come back down to their house. And she said it was in the summertime. It was early morning. They'd go like around 7:30 in the morning. And no clouds, just a beautiful, crisp blue sky. Beautiful sun everywhere, and they're at the peak of like their trail, I guess, and they see in the distance this it was a white horse covered in all of this really beautiful ceremonial garb, kind of like colorful feathers and bones, that kind of dress. The horse was really dolled up, really nice, and the Native American who was riding him was also in ceremonial garb, just a lot of the beautiful, I can't remember what that's called, when they wear this, it's kind of a handmade bone and feather decorated thing that they wear over their chest, and matching the garb that matched the horse. And my folks were just enamored. They were just like, oh, wow, beautiful. And so they walked right up to him, and they could tell they had been running, because the horse was covered in sweat and he was covered in sweat. They were really, really sweaty. And my mom walked right up to him to be like, who are you? Like, your horse is beautiful. Where'd you come from? And he disappears right in front of them.
Wow.
It was broad daylight. Yeah, broad daylight. So that was where I grew up, and I would find all sorts of interesting things in the backyard. And my mom, thankfully, my dad wasn't, but my mom was, as we call it, I call it fringy, because I hate using the word conspiracy theories. That's like a curse word to me. But I like to call it fringe because it's all the stuff outside the box. So my mom was very fringy and, would talk about all sorts of things like that with me as a kid. So I just, always kept my eyes open and would question things. And where their house was had a lot of kind of interesting history apparently in that area that I wasn't aware of until like later in life. And as a little kid, you're like, oh, everyone's yard has arrowheads in it. You just kind of assume
Right.
things when you're little, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah. And I think the only other, I'm trying to remember.
What about the projector story?
Yikes. So this story, well, I don't know. Do you want this? It's not Sasquatch related.
I'm interested in all of it.
All of it. You're the best, Matt.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's all connected in one way or another. I don't know if it's
absolutely.
I don't know if it's all that stuff that's connected or if we're the connection between all of it, but something's going on.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah, the projector story was really nightmarish. It was so I've always been kind of like the kid that was born into a family that like never understood her. And I'm sure probably some of your listeners can relate to that. So I even though mom was really fringy, I didn't really have a lot of I guess camaraderie. And so I was always a kid that's like, yeah, there you go. Just kind of go into your corner kind of thing. Like, you don't want to speak up too much about certain things. And plus my dad, would get kind of nervous about fringy things. So you couldn't talk to him about that stuff. So there was one of the pastimes that we loved doing as a family is, do you remember like when we had the really cool old projectors and and our dad always had the reels going. And so I'd always love, we didn't really have movies, but we had our projector reels. And so we had the old projector set up with the reels, and we're watching like old clips of, birthdays and stuff that we're celebrating in the kitchen. And it was, it'd be my mom, my dad. My dad had, he was like, had an old, I don't even know what you call them, but it's before they had JVC. It's like, it still runs on, it takes film and it makes that, when you're playing it sound. So he had reels of when we were younger in the kitchen celebrating, birthday stuff. So it's just the four of us and we're having like mom makes a cake and it's my little brother's birthday and she's got the candles on the cake and everything. And then there's always presents on the other end of the table and, the lights are on and everything, nothing weird or out of the ordinary. And in the film, so what happened in real life, and at the time, I think I was 10. So in real life, what happened is, it's my brother's birthday. We sing to him. He, we're eating cake and he blows out the candles, obviously before we eat cake. And then he opens his presents. And that's just how everybody's birthday happens pretty much when you're celebrating with your family. And that's what happened. And then when we're watching, this was like the following year, we're watching this reel back. And on the reel, what happens is my brother opens up all the presents, and then I thought my dad had kicked it into reverse, but he kicks he was trying to entertain. He's like, watch this, kids, your dad's going to do something cool. So he kicks the machine into reverse so that it shows us going backwards. How that's kind of fun,
right.
Like watching people move backwards. But what I saw was everyone was moving forward in the film like normal. No one was moving backwards. They're moving forward as a normal day. And my brother goes and gets Scotch tape and he's taping up all of his packages. And then the packages are all together again. And everyone is laughing. And I'm like, wait. And I'm yelling at my parents. I'm like, are you guys watching this? This doesn't make any sense. And they're just, it was like I was talking to, gosh, it was absolutely terrifying for me because I'm watching this and none of the bodies are moving backwards. They're moving forward. My kid brother tapes up his packages and it's all in a pile. And I'm watching him tape it up on this film. And I'm like, Dad, this doesn't make any sense. Are you in reverse? And he's like, yeah, it's in reverse. I'm like, do you see the image? This doesn't make any sense. Why is he taping up the packages? He goes, well, it's in reverse. And I'm like, that doesn't make any logical sense. I'm like arguing with my parents. how what they're seeing, what we're watching, doesn't make any sense at all. And my brother was just, my brother would just kind of nod and go along with, whatever louder voice was. And I'm like, you guys, this doesn't make any sense. Look at this. And then I kept pressing my dad, like, play it back. And my dad's like, no, you're just making a big deal out of nothing. And I'm like, you guys are watching the same thing I am. This makes no sense. And I remember I was just, I was so upset for a couple of years after that. That was so scary to me because it just didn't make any sense. I could clearly see it, and they just thought, oh, that's normal. That's just what would play back in reverse. And I'm like, no one's even the sound wasn't reversed, Matt. The sound wasn't reversed. The motions weren't reversed. And suddenly he's taping up his packages.
Yeah, I would assume that to open the packages, he was probably just tearing paper off left and right.
Oh, of course, he's a little boy, right? Like what? Right? Like. So that was creepy.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, do you even have a thought on what was going on? What that experience was about?
I don't know. I remember during that time I used to have kind of like night terrors. And the night terrors were things I had to work on my own because my parents are very much kind of hands off. Like if the kid is having stuff going on, it's something they need to deal with. So I would, and the scariest part is this is a really big house, and our bedrooms for the kids is at like this, after this long corridor, this dark long corridor that's flanked by like one side it's like all floor to ceiling glass, and the other side is like huge oak double doors, and you have to go down this long corridor, and then the kids' bedrooms are like way far away, so from like civilization. I mean, it was a kind of a cool house, but a creepy house. And so I used to have these wild kind of nightmares that would start off as something really, it was always a mission. It was always terrifying. And actually I dreamt of, one of them was I actually saw the image of, do you remember like the initial Terminators where the skin comes off and they have the glowing red eyes, and I actually saw that years before that movie ever came out. So I wonder if that's like a collective consciousness thing. But I had this reoccurring dream about the Terminator, but I had no idea that that's what it would be called. I'm just a kid. And it was this ritzy little girl. She was 6, this cute little kind of pettifour dress, and she had these ritzy parents with this big old fancy mansion, and they had this nanny, this robot nanny, that would perch at the edge of her bed, and it would, like, when she would say goodnight, it would shut down, and the thing would, like, kind of curl up into a fetal position, but perched at the end of her bed, like the footboard. And all the red lights would shut off. And then in the morning, it would wake up and it would take care of her. But no one seemed to mind that this thing looked like a terrifying chrome skeleton that's like 6 feet tall. No one seemed to mind that. But these people had the money for it. They bought this thing for their daughter to keep her safe. And then years later, this movie comes out. And I'm like, my heart like it was wrenching for me to see that. But so I would have these recurring night terrors. That was one of them. And others, and then I would have them over and over and over again until I would face whatever was scary. And as soon as I did, it would shrink to be like something innocent, like a puppy or a kitten or like my friend suddenly. But it would only happen after I learned to not be afraid. And so I had these dreams over and over and over again until I learned that if the only way to escape the night terror, only way to escape the fear was if I was to face my fear in the dream. And then I stopped having them. That's how I cured my night terrors. And so I think this was during a time where I was still having the night terrors. And so I wonder if whatever entity or being was testing me was trying to make me fearful in the moment of obviously being conscious, because I was wide awake with my folks in the living room watching this, on our Knox Lancer screen. And it was absolutely terrifying to see because it made no logical sense. And the worst part is that, you're surrounded by people that also have eyes and a brain and ears, and they're not using their senses to discern that, hey, that is weird. Why is that happening? So I think that was, I don't know if that was maybe training or a test of some sort to show that maybe I didn't really belong in this, in this group, that maybe, I needed to like keep my wits about me and to keep my eyes open, because I didn't know when, another test was going to come. Or I never got the feeling that anything at the house was malicious until the skinwalker happened. And I only say it's a skinwalker because, again, I didn't know what I had seen until many years later, because it's hard to talk about these things because they're fairly terrifying.
What did you see? You didn't describe it earlier.
Oh, so my dad had this thing where they had quite a bit of land, and so they were always building on. My dad was an entrepreneur, and he worked and lived at the same place. So he worked out of the home, and every couple years he would like build on to the house. And so this was one of the the biggest additions he ever made to the house was he built himself an office. And this office, it was a brand new building. It was right off of the house. You just have to like walk from, the outside door of the garage, from this little walkway that's tiled really nice. And then it's about, 10 feet away from the house, and there's his office door, and the office was beautiful. It was fairly small. I mean, it wasn't like, let me think. It was maybe, 500 square feet. 500 square feet, maybe 400. And it was, drywall and stucco. And so if you come into the front door, there's a big picture window right by the front door. And then his desk, he had a really big desk opposite of that big picture window. And he was really proud of himself that he had haggled this score and deal from this estate sale and got this huge, I called it the dungeon candelabra, or like, not candelabra, what are the things that hang? Chandelier. It was this ominous looking chandelier that was like wood and had these like spiky brass bits. It was like it was very brutalist from like the 70s. And it was enormous. This thing was just huge. And it had probably about 20 different fixtures for the light bulbs. And he had like 100-watt bulbs in this thing because he was so proud of it. And it lit up like the sun. It was like hard to look at when you were in that office because it like fried your retinas. So he's got this huge desk with this huge chandelier. And then if you're walking past like the big desk, there's another big picture window. I mean, the place is real bright, super bright, brand new glass, brand new paint, brand new carpet. And so, my kid brother and I were all excited about the new office. So we're asking her, Mom, can we kind of camp out in the office tonight? And we're not sleeping over. We're just there a couple hours past her bedtime, to kind of camp out. And I think I was about 9 at the time. So Mom was like, yeah, sure. Let's go out to the office. It's kind of fun. So we're in our jammies, and, we brushed our teeth and we got ready for bed, and we were going to go camp out in the office with Mom. So she's sitting, so I'm sitting with my blanket. I have my blanket and a pillow, and I'm sitting cross-legged, and I'm facing the front door, and that gigantic picture window that's right next to it. And then my kid brother is to my left. We're sitting kind of in a circle, and then my mom is to my right. But they're kind of backsides are away from that area. And so I'm sitting there, and we're just talking, and we've got the gigantic, chandelier on. That's like the sun. It's so bright in there. And I'm, how every time, like, you're just kind of, your eyes get relaxed and you're in a conversation, but if you're facing like a window or something, your eyes just every once in a while just kind of glance up at the window or a door just because you're aware of, possible traffic or whatever. And so every once in a while, I'm just, we're just talking and we're laughing, and we're just talking about the day. And then, my eyes are just keep glancing up at this gigantic picture window. And what's directly outside of it is a huge navel orange tree that's been there since the early 70s. So it's a really big, beautiful tree. And I could see, the leaves, and I can see, just like the trunk and everything. But there's a nice kind of like patio area, just a small little patio area right outside that window. So I keep looking up, and I just see the pretty tree and the leaves and the bark. And the reason why I can see this so well is because this freaking chandelier is so bright that it's illuminating everything outside of that gigantic picture window, right? So the night goes on, and we're talking. We're only in there for like 30 minutes, and I look up, and Matt, boy, I see this huge almond-shaped, like a fattened almond-shaped, wide face. It's probably the width of 2 basketballs, but it's like kind of like, I guess, an egg shape on its side, pushed up against the glass, almond-shaped eyes, elongated, huge eyes, like a Cheshire cat, with a big Cheshire cat grin, many, 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 many teeth, something out of a nightmare, and a tiny, tiny little nose that's mashed up against the window, and it is looking dead at me, and my heart stopped. I'm not joking. It felt like I had never been, I was beyond afraid. I was beyond fear. Literally, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even blink my eyes. It felt like my heart stopped. And I'm looking at this, and this thing is looking right at me, and it is so pleased that I am so terrified. It is just eating this up. And my mom and brother see my face, and they see that I stopped talking, and they're like, Tia, what's wrong? What's wrong? Are you okay? Just in the most unhelpful way. Instead of turning around and looking where my eyes are looking, right? They're just looking at me like I'm the entertainment. And I can't move my limbs. I'm completely frozen. I can't say anything. And it took all the concentration I had to muster out what I thought was a word, which it wasn't. It was just me going, and all I could do was, like, my motor skills were completely shot, and I had my blanket, like my sleepy blanket, right? And I've got both of my hands kind of like I'm holding on to like bike handles. I'm holding on to my blanket with like my stressed knuckles, my white knuckles, and I'm slowly pulling. I'm moaning like that, and I'm slowly pulling my blanket up over my head where I curl into the fetal position and cover myself with a blanket. And all my mom and brother could do is like, what's wrong with her? I don't know. Are you okay? And they're just like, I'm like, why wouldn't you turn around and look? Because that thing was in the window for many long, painful seconds. It was like, let me think, 7, 8 seconds, full seconds. And that's all I could do. I couldn't talk. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't do anything. And it took them a good 20 minutes to cajole me out of my cocoon. And then like a total of maybe 30 minutes before I could talk again. It was awful. It was awful. And so I never told that story until I was in the workforce. I was an adult in the workforce, and I told my coworker, who turned out to be really fringy. He's like, that's a skinwalker. You saw a skinwalker. I'm like, what's that? So then that's how I learned about Skinwalker Ranch. And so I don't know if that's what I saw. I just know whatever it was, I could feel that its eyes were locked with me, and it was so pleased with itself that I was absolutely beyond terrified. It loved it. It was like feeding off of me.
And you were 9?
I was 9. Yeah.
And you were doing a lot of pantomimes that I saw and nobody else saw.
Yeah.
It sounds like with your hands, like it may have been like the face might have been about 18 inches wide, like a foot and a half wide.
I was like, what's 2 basketballs? It's like
That's about 2 feet what you were doing right now.
So hold on.
That's a wide
about
face.
that wide, really wide, kind of egg-shaped, with elongated almond eyes and a tiny, tiny little nose, completely out of proportion. A wide, like if you were to take your nose and like make it really wide and flatten it against your face, like up against a piece of glass, like that, and then this Cheshire-like grin with just tons of teeth, loads of teeth, and now not like jagged teeth like what you'd see from Stephen King stuff, not like that. It was like normal shaped teeth, but a lot of them. So like humanoid looking shaped teeth, not like jagged
or anything like that.
No hair. It was kind of a whitish gray, and that again another thing is like, well, was it a dirty window? No, these were brand new windows. Like we literally peeled the stickers off of them, that day. Like they were installed, they were clean. They were right out of the factory. There wasn't a storm, and it wasn't like, oh, you saw a bunch of leaves outside. No, 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 no. This was a face smushed up against the glass, and eyes were locked on me, and it was absolutely unbearable. I mean, that was 8 seconds of like pure wow. Yeah. I'd never been so paralyzed ever. I've never felt that before, and I never saw anything like that again, and I hope I never see anything like that again.
So again, translating what you're doing with your hand gestures in front of me,
what?
This face was wider than it was tall. It wasn't roundish.
Yeah, right. It was like an egg on its side, but it was symmetrical, but it was like an egg shape.
So from your hand gestures, about 2 feet wide, or almost 2 feet wide, and about 1.5 feet tall. And it looked like you did big almond eyes too.
Yeah, and it had heavy eyelids, like kind of, you could explain them as like bedroom eyes, like a heavy eyelid. They were opened eyes, but they were huge. They were like, I don't know, the size.
She's doing about 3 inches wide each. Yeah.
With a tiny little, like a nose, a size of our nose, but it's flat and wide. You can barely see the nose. It's like you could only see basically where like nostril slits would be. And it was, boy,
freaky.
Yeah. So that was the only thing. That was the only time I ever felt that there was something with a dark agenda at the house. I'd never seen anything or felt anything other than, those creepy dreams, which at the end, once they taught me, like, do not fear, then, I had a much easier childhood. I could go to bed and know that, okay, if this happened, what did I learn? Do not fear, face your fear. And then I would end that part of the dream, that dark part of the dream, would end quickly, very quickly. So
obviously that's terrifying. Okay.
Yeah.
And the fact that, you were 9 at the time, that would be even more so. So I know that it's impossible to really compare the two situations, but whenever you saw the possible Bigfoot, the boulder that changed into this creature, what kind of emotions and feelings did you have from it whenever you realized what was going on?
That's such a good question. You know what? I never felt scared. I didn't feel scared at all. I felt in awe. I was completely in awe that I thought this was a rock, and it's this beautiful, soft moving thing. Like, I had no idea what it was. I could tell it was alive, whatever it was, but it didn't fit anything that I had in my mind to label it, right? I was absolutely captivated and mesmerized by the shiny glistening of the hair. Saying sparkly is going too far, but it was absolutely glistening, like with depth. It had depth of color, like something that you would pay a lot of money for if you went to get your hair done. That's what it looked like. It was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. And I think part of it too was that I could tell whatever it was, this person that we had clearly, disrupted, I saw it heave. I saw it like just, it was kind of miffed, like make that big dramatic exhale, like a big intake of air, and then
I do it all the time.
It was so funny because because it was super dramatic, right? And I'm like, oh no, what? And so when I guess in the moment, all I saw was a sudden movement, but it was calm. It wasn't walking erratically. It wasn't, running away. It was walking very slowly. It didn't turn in faces. It was just kind of, just like, fine, I'll move, like that kind of body language, I guess, that it's like, all right, I'm just going to go over here then,
So did you think that, like, I know that it's not stuff that people really think about, so a lot of it's going to be like afterthought, but was it a situation where, so now you just spent your time wondering, like, what was that thing that we saw?
Oh,
or did you, like, instantly recognize that, like, this is something that isn't supposed to exist, like, this isn't normal?
That's a good question. I didn't have a label in my mind for what that was, and had never done any research, and I wasn't even aware. Like, I had heard of Bigfoot, but it didn't register. Like, you think of the only Bigfoot I could relate to at the time was, do you remember the show Harry and the Hendersons?
Yeah, I think I've heard of it.
I think it was from the 90s. So it was,
I'm teasing.
yeah,
yes, of course I know what Harry and the Hendersons is. I have a Bigfoot podcast. Come on.
It was a really cute show. And so that was my only label in my mind of what a Bigfoot was that show. And that's not, it just didn't register. That's literally all the background I had when I saw that. It didn't fit a single thing that I knew of. So I knew whatever I had seen was not fitting my reality filter. And when I saw his face, he was paralyzed. He was paralyzed, and all he could do was barely muster, like he was just concentrating on driving and breathing, and he was his eyes were so big that night. He's like, "Let us never speak of this again." Very firm. And I could tell, like, he couldn't handle, what had just happened. Like, and I didn't want to, like, push him either, because we were trying to get home safely. And so we were kind of thinking, wow, we're out in the middle of nowhere. I don't know what that was, but it's a hell of a lot bigger than we are. Our cell phones don't work out here. Who can you call if that's a problem? You know what I mean? Like, there's not even like a gas station for miles. Like, there's nowhere you can go. And so I think we were just focusing on getting home.
Yeah.
But it never got out of my mind. It drove me nuts. Like, what was that? It never got out of my mind. I just remember being absolutely just captivated and watching it in the high headlamps, like, just absolutely mesmerized.
So Edward,
Yeah.
she told you this story. I know that it kind of clicked in your head immediately. Hey, this was a Bigfoot she saw.
Yeah. So for me, I'm I think like you, reading the Loch Ness Monster books and the Bigfoot books in that area of, like, the school library, in elementary school or whatever. So, I mean, but I had never met anybody who met one. And I for most of my life, I thought, hey, that's like an, Oregon and Washington sort of thing.
Right.
Then listening to your podcasts with like Baron Kumbo, and I forget what that show was called back in like 2010, 2011, something like that. I kind of got exposed to a little bit more information. I really loved all your work, and I began to realize, oh, they're in the South too. Well, wait, they could just be about anywhere, But
yeah.
Anyways, so from your stories and that group, I learned, oh, Bigfoot can move on all fours. And I had that kind of in my head when she told me the story, and I said, that might have been a Bigfoot, because she just didn't have any explanation for it at all. But she was like, hey, I've got this crazy story.
You were a good listener.
So then we watched the Lloyd Pye video, which I think is fascinating. Anyway, I have a number of experiences kind of from around our house, but I have never seen a Bigfoot. I did hear a voice once, which scared me. And I've had some other kind of weird experiences.
So you emailed me, and you kind of told me, some of your experiences and everything. And, at the end of the email, you said something, like, if you want to talk to me, great. If it's too weird, I understand. Like, I think you it almost seemed like you were kind of downplaying your own experiences a bit. And I think you had some very substantial experiences.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, the thing is, for like the longest time, I didn't know that these were Bigfoot. Well, so let me figure out how to tell these. The thing is, for a long time, I didn't know these were Bigfoot experiences. And then once I kind of realized, wait, yeah, this all kind of fits together. This is probably a Bigfoot situation going on. It was really confirmed for me when I had kind of like a scary night, and a Bigfoot spoke to me through the wall. And then after that, it kind of all settled into my mind, and I just kind of let my imagination soar a little bit, and I think that has been important to me. So, I go back to like listening, so I'm going back like 10 years. I'm listening to the Bigfoot podcast during the day while I work, And I'm just like, my soul is yearning for Bigfoot, but I live in the middle of a city, right? They're not, that's not going to happen, right?
Right.
But I think there is some level on which, like, things will work out. And I just, for whatever reason, my soul just craved Bigfoot contact. So like when it started to happen, I didn't believe it, because it's like, oh, I'm just, I'm looking for a Bigfoot experience. So I didn't believe it. And I still could have, like, what is it called? Like, talked myself out of it,
mm-hmm.
except for the voice. And then that's when it all was confirmed for me. But like, I remember hearing on those podcasts, long ago, that you and the group kind of saying, like, hey, a Bigfoot is kind of like a haunted house, except it's outside.
Yeah.
And we've sort of had that kind of situation. But and for a long time, so let me describe kind of our house a little bit and kind of where we are. So we're located on the southwest side of Phoenix, and there's this kind of mountain range / park called South Mountain Park, which is a really large municipal park. I think it's the largest city park in the world, in America. And it's basically you can't call it a mountain range, except like if you're in Arizona living in the city and 500 feet high or whatever seems like a mountain to you. These are big hills, a kind of big section of hills that separate a couple cities. But it's a wilderness area, and our house is in a little community, kind of surrounded by other smaller hills, just enough to give us really terrible cell phone reception. But we've got also a city canal that goes through it. So we're like the closest year-round reliable water source, and our house is just a couple hundred yards away from that. And when I moved in with Tia, like, there wasn't closet space in the house and room for my stuff. So the first thing we did is we kind of built an outbuilding, like a storage building on the far part of the property, like at the back fence. And we made it kind of tall so it would hold all my stuff, and we kind of put like a loft up there with a bed, just in case I wanted to sleep out there with my cat, who wouldn't get along with any of her cats. So this was kind of like a giant cat house plus storage for my junk, and we put desks out there, and I could work out there during the day and spend time with Taz. And we had power but no facilities. So this is a little embarrassing to say, but it's critical to the story. Otherwise, believe me, I wouldn't share. That I would pee in like a gallon jug, like my pee jug, and like I wouldn't. And I mostly back. This is like 2018, 2019 time. So mostly I was working in the office, but like 1 day, 2 days a month, I would work from home, and like sometimes I'd work out with Taz. I want to spend time with Taz in that little casita, we called it. So
the jug.
Yeah.
I wish I had my own little building with a pee jug, to be honest.
It works really well, Matt.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. And I'm sure my wife would, send me out there quite a bit.
Okay. I'm gonna put pause on the pee jug for now, because that's the story. That's gonna get to another story later. But so the gist is, like, every night eventually we had another cat with Taz, and or another 2 cats with Taz, and so every night I'm walking out there, sometimes without a flashlight, and on this particular night, this first story I want to tell, like, at the gas station, there's always little knickknacks they want to sell you that are like they look fantastic when you buy them, but then they never work. And at that point, they had these like little LED flashlights. It was like $5, and it's like little, click the end and all these LEDs come on, and like just really crappy. They look great in the store, but they just do not illuminate anything.
Right.
And literally, I remember maybe the batteries had run down a little bit, but I took this flashlight with me. I'm taking food out to the cats, going to put them to bed. It's sometime in the fall, and I'm not sure which year this is. This is probably 2018, but I'm not sure. And so it's a cold time of year, and it's pitch black. It's one of the, I guess is it a new moon? I think it's a new moon when there's no moon. So it's completely pitch black, and I know my feet know the way to the casita. I don't, there's no snakes in winter. I'm not really worried about anything. And I've got this little flashlight, which when you click it, it lights up, but it doesn't illuminate anything. I literally had it just so I could help find, like, I could hold it 6 inches from the door handle, and like find where to get the key into the door. Does that make sense? Like, I just want to be able to see the key lock so I can unlock the door. That's all of that this flashlight is good for. But anyway, so the other component of the story is I was feeding the birds a lot at this time, and we had these things in Arizona. I don't know if they have them in Oklahoma or anywhere else. Maybe they do, but I've never heard of them anywhere else. Here they're called quail blocks, and they're kind of like grains and peanut butter and like, I don't know, maybe agricultural stuff it's not good enough to be sold and for some other purpose, and they just compress this down into a big old, like, really hard block. Like they sell them for like $11 or $12, and they probably weigh 20 pounds, and they're about 1 foot by 1 foot in size, or maybe a little smaller, 10 inches by 10 inches, something like that, maybe weighing 15 or 20 pounds. These things are big. They call them quail blocks, and I would put them out in the yard for the rabbits to kind of nibble on, and the quail, these are too hard for the quail to even peck at. I don't know why they call them dove blocks or whatever. So we
use them a lot for deer here.
Oh, okay. So you got those too.
They're salt blocks, but we also have those kind of blocks too.
So I had 3 of these in the yard, and I noticed they were like moving around the yard, and I just thought, it's interesting. Like maybe if the rabbit gets really excited and is leaning against it, it can move. We have a slight grade to the ground, so I never really thought much about these, but I had a couple of them in the yard, and I kind of knew where they were, and I was really interested. I love watching wildlife. So anyways, I'm walking to the casita. I'm taking some food. I'm gonna put the boys to bed. Basically, and lock up, just check on them, make sure they've got water, that sort of thing. So I'm walking to the casita. I've got this little flashlight in my hand, and it's on, but you can't see anything with it. And I heard a noise. I think it was the quail block being dropped, and I like spun and was shining my light in that direction. And the quail block I knew was about 15 to 20 feet from me. So basically. Well, what I thought at the time was that we had there's a little house next door to us where there's been a lot of renters and it's kind of miscreant kids. And T had told me once about a story where somebody had taken a photograph of her inside her house, like through the window. And there was a part of, how, what are those fences called?
Chain link.
Yeah.
It's a no-climb fence.
So we have a 5 foot tall no-climb chain link fence. That means there's no pole on top. No pole on the bottom. And where it attaches at the corner of the property, someone, they live on the adjoining property, someone had undone the bolts on that so that it was attached to top but not at the bottom, so that you could basically crawl through the fence, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's like a triangular hole. And she'd had this property. So I thought that like little kids were getting on the property and like maybe smoking or something. We have about an acre of property, and there's some areas you can be on the back of the property where we wouldn't see you because of like some
creosote.
Yeah, creosote bushes. Anyways, so I thought there were 2 teenagers, I'm sorry, not teenagers, maybe little kids. I thought there were 2 miscreants on the property because I heard this dove block fall, boom, and footsteps, like somebody ran past me just a few feet to my right, and like hit or. Well, I don't know what they did. They ran past me to the fence behind me. So there's a fence 20 feet behind me. The dove block that I'm facing is 20 feet ahead of me. Somebody runs to my right, within a couple of feet of me. Thump, 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 thump. Like it's a biped. It's a person, right? And then I hear the fence behind me like someone hit it, like bang. But then I heard nothing after that. So I thought he probably ran into the fence and then kind of like dropped. And the other person like ran the other direction. So I heard 2 footfalls. And I'm holding this light towards them. I'm saying like, hey, you can't be here. You're not supposed to be here. And I presume they thought I could see them, but I could see nothing. This flashlight illuminated nothing. So I saw nothing at all. But somebody ran like a couple feet to my right and hit this fence. And then somebody else ran the other direction around the other side of the house. Anyways, scary event. I drop my stuff. I think there's kids on the property. So I go and I get a baseball bat and I stomp around the property like, hey, you don't belong here for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Because I'm the man of the household. I'm supposed to, I've never been in a situation like this before, and I don't know what to do. So I just wanted to go put on a show, like, hey, this is our house, this is our property. And then I take care of the cats and go to bed and forget about it. And this is where the story switches over to Tia, because that night when I fell asleep, something happened. What happened, Tia?
So always the interesting things that happen at our place happen between like 2 to 3 a.m. or like 3:30. That's like the witching hour. So we're sound asleep, and both of us are pretty, like good sleepers, and I got absolutely jolted out of my skin. So if you can think, the wall that's facing where Edward had all this activity and that evening, that is our bedroom wall, and that's the same wall that has our headboard up against it. And then above the headboard is this wide painting that hangs above the headboard. It's about the same width of the bed. And so I got completely jolted out of my skin with someone was smacking their hand right between our two heads, right above our headboard, right underneath the painting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what was so crazy was that the force of this, and it's like the sound of like someone smacking their hand hard against the outside of the house, the outside wall. And it's a siding, by the way. The house has siding on it. It's not stucco or anything. And what was so jolting was not only is the headboard shaking with every blow to the house, so was the painting. And I was scared the painting was going to fall down on our heads. And the force, like the sound coming from the spot right between our two heads, like above the headboard, was a width that was bigger than a large man's hand. It was like a very large dinner plate or a small serving tray, like that size. And so I could, every time a blow happened, you can feel the headboard and the painting go like that. And I'm like lightly punching him. I'm like, wake up! Did you hear that? And of course, it takes him like a few seconds to come to, because at the time he could sleep like through locomotives and stuff.
Can.
And I'm like,
so here's the thing. Like, she wakes me up and she tells me that somebody came and banged on the house, but I don't really have a sense of like how big this hand was and what she's conveying. Like, she just said, look, it was so they hit it so hard, like the headboard shook. And I'm like, yeah, well, okay, a teenager could do that. And, but like the painting kind of like flung out a little bit from the walls. Like, yeah, okay, well, the teenagers were upset that I chased them off. So they came back and they wanted to, they wanted to let me know, put me in my place, So even though I'd heard of Bigfoot and whatnot, I know that like a house slapping thing is kind of normal.
I mean, like, Edward, you tell me that you listen to the podcast and you're saying that like, so yeah, at nighttime I was walking out here and something dropped this big old mineral block and took off running. And then later that night, something was slapping the side of the house, but I had no idea that it was Bigfoot.
I know, I deserve this. But the thing is, at the time I was thinking like, this is Arizona.
Yeah, of course.
They don't live here.
There's no way.
None of that. It took me a long time. That's what's kind of like shameful is like in the time, I don't know why I was so clouded about it, but I just had in my mind like, oh yeah, she had some teenager on the property at some point, like taking a picture through the window. We've just got these, it's this problem house,
right,
they're teenage boys. So anyway, I just didn't think beyond that. And since I slept through somehow this crazy experience, so we only recognized this one. I remember like 6 months after this, like thinking back and thinking like, oh,
because it was huge. The spot where they were, and it wasn't like, how Matt, like you could make a different sound if you were doing like a monkey fist hit, or punching a wall. Totally different sound than if you're using your open flat hand. And it was like, it was more than a slap. It was like bam, 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 5 times. And the painting I thought was going to come right off the wall. It was nuts. But so go ahead, baby. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to go to switch to another story, which I know when this one happened exactly. This was 2019. I'm going to say exactly, and I'm going to get the date wrong. 2019, in February of, it was rainy. It was, I think, the 22nd. So I think if I looked at a computer and went back in time, I think the 22nd is the Thursday morning. But basically that Wednesday, I had been in the casita, and I'd worked there all day, enjoying Taz and Boxcar. And I've been spending a little bit more time in the casita because earlier that week, and this is the way I remember it, and Tia remembers it slightly differently. Like we'd had some weird looks, like the cats were acting weird. Like we would go out there, and I remember one time we went in there, and we were standing in the doorway, and we were calling to the cats.
That's broad daylight, and they're really chill cats.
It's broad daylight, and Boxcar is like giving us the weirdest expression. He's freaked out, and he's looking like above and behind us. Do you remember
that above our heads? So there was one day that Edward was wearing a baseball cap.
Yeah.
And Boxcar like ran. We call him Boxcar Jaxie. He looks like a hobo. He's really funny, but he's really relaxed. These cats there are 2 of them. They're just super relaxed. And at the time, Taz was no longer with us. Taz had passed away. But Edward showed up wearing, a Cardinals hat. It was black, and he was wearing it backwards. And Boxcar looked right at, and he's seen Edward 1,000 times. Like, Edward always feeds him, so it's not a big deal. And he normally just like slathers all over you with loving, and he's just really chill. And so Edward opens the door. I'm behind him, and I see Boxcar's face, and Boxcar looks right at his head. So I don't know. I just figured it was the cap, right? And ran and hid. Like, ran and hid, would not come out for food. Just totally unusual for him. He's like just a disposal for food. He loves it. Ran and hid, wouldn't come out for like, I mean, it was hard. It was like 20 minutes.
It was hard to get him to
coax him out. It was so weird.
Like, my fear thinking back is that something was standing behind us that we couldn't see. And it was, so anyways, so that was a couple of days before this story happened. So I decided, okay, Boxcar's been acting weird. I need to spend more time with the cats. So I work from home that whole day, and I fill up the pee jug, so it needs to be emptied out front. Like, so there's a creosote bush about 10 feet in front of the casita. So I empty it, and this was some old pee. This smelled like ammonia, like concentrated ammonia. Terrible. I probably hurt that poor bush. So, but I realized later that this might have been an attractant, or like maybe claiming a territorial claim of some sort that I wasn't aware of.
I've heard a lot of Bigfoot stories start out with this story, so yeah.
So then I go back and I finish my work day and all that, and then I'm sleeping there that night, and it's a very misty but not rainy night, like maybe a little drizzly, and the roof of this casita is slanted.
Can I interject really quick?
Go ahead,
Matt. It was a gallon. It was a gallon, just so you know.
We know,
so whatever's out there.
Gallon jug.
Yeah, gallon jug.
We got it. We got it. I'm embarrassed about it.
That's a lot of pee.
Yeah.
So I'm sleeping out there that night, and I hadn't slept out there many times. And it was the first time I slept out there, like in like February for us is like as cold as it gets. Like I guess it is winter, but it was really cold that night. And there's drizzly and whatnot, and I'm hanging out with the boys. I'm reading something, I guess, on my phone or whatever. I'm in this little loft area. I've got two cats. Taz was there too, so he must have still been alive.
Was he still?
I remember him. So at any rate, I'm just trying to get back into the story. So there was like when the temperature changes a lot at our place, there are a few places in the house where like creaks or noises will come. Like, we have a shade thing made out of aluminum that will bong a couple times as like it changes temperature, and like the metal contracts a little bit. It'll kind of like let out some tension a few times.
Like settling noises.
And I remember I'm sitting there, and it's like, it's 10 o'clock, and I'm hearing these kind of like tapping noises on the outside. And I'm like, oh, okay, it's getting colder, so maybe that wall over there is creaking a little bit because of thermal expansion kind of contracting now. But it just kept happening, and it kept happening, and it kept happening. And after a long time, you start to get that creepy feeling, like you're watching things on your phone, you're not really paying attention, and then you start really getting this creepy feeling, oh my gosh, like this, like the temperature hasn't changed in the last hour. Like it's 1 o'clock in the morning. It's been in the 40s or high 30s for, I guess probably would have been in the 40s, for hours now. Why am I still hearing these like tapping noises on one side of the house or the other?
Tell them the pattern.
That's going to come in a second.
Okay.
So I keep hearing these. I'm hearing it, basically I felt like I was surrounded, and I was being like, this whole building was getting tapped on and tapped on and tapped on. And I started to get like super scared, and I'm super exhausted too, because I've had this long work day. And so I'm kind of dozing a little bit. And my doze, I don't know why I was focused on Bigfoot, and it may have been the situation I was in, and like I was obsessed with Bigfoot, or kind of knew about Bigfoot and listened to these shows. I kind of remember kind of dozing off a little bit. I'm dreaming about Bigfoot, and I wake up a little bit, and I'm thinking about Bigfoot. Oh my gosh, maybe it's a Bigfoot tapping on the house. But I just can't quite get there. I can't convince myself that they're here, really, that this would happen to me. And so anyway, so when I fell asleep, I was having this dream that I was back at college, and I had a Bigfoot buddy, and I'm telling him, look, you just can't come to class with me. You have to, like, people are going to freak out. You got to go, honestly, buddy, I love you, but you're going to have to jump over the fence and kind of like walk this back way. Otherwise, people are going to panic. So I'm having, I think, maybe I'm having a dream of a positive interaction. I'm telling that part of the story like this, like conscientiously, because I want to emphasize. I think that they are beings that have some. I kind of go a little woo here. I believe the woo because I feel like it was I was getting my surface thoughts read or something like that, and it was saying like, hey, what kind of interactions does this guy have with us? And like I fell asleep a little bit, and like it was saying, oh, he's having positive interaction with a Bigfoot in his dream. Maybe he could be a friend. At any rate, so I'm not able to sleep. I'm kind of freaking out, and but I still have convinced myself, oh, this is just thermal expansion coefficient, whatever, thermal whatever, just knocks. It's not. I'm not under siege. And then what happened is this like musical rhythmic tapping, and I've never heard anybody else describe this. I still remember it like perfectly. And Matt, have you been camping? I know you've been camping a bunch of times. I know there's been some point when you've been under a rain fly where like it's tied to a tree or something and the water pools a little bit there. And as the water pools, it gets to a point where the water is deep enough that like a lot of it spills at the same moment. And then after it's spilled, like the cloth goes back up and it like stops flowing. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. So
I hear this rhythmic tapping, which is, it was 676. Like I kind of want to tap it out here, but it's like it sounds like a falling, like it sounds like 20 raindrops striking, and it's a pattern of 6 and then 7 and then 6 in this perfect rhythmic pattern. I thought, oh, that's amazing. Like it's, this water's collecting. This is great for Arizona. We don't get enough. And it's collected at that corner of the roof, and it just kind of pitter-pattered on that side. That's wonderful. And then it did it exactly the same, 6, 7, 6, and it's at the other corner of the house, the little storage building. And then this is when I freak out, because I'm like, that's really unusual.
Can I interject really quick about the roof?
I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
I haven't forgotten.
Yeah.
So I have the same pattern in both, and like I'm starting to tingle all over my body. I'm starting to get like hyperventilating. I'm panicking. I'm like, wait a minute, that is a conscious communication. That is not raindrops. And then it dawns on me, and I get this really terrible sinking feeling. That is the high side of the roof. That is not the low side of the roof. It did the two corners where the roof slopes up, so it couldn't have been water pooling and then dripping and tapping. And then I knew, like, oh my gosh, there is somebody here. They're tapping on the casita. It's a Bigfoot. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And then I started thinking about the pee. I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I've heard of that. Maybe it's upset. It's a territorial thing. So I start really panicking, and I just stay in a panic all night. I can't sleep, and I'm just in this whatever. And at 3:50 a.m., the sun is going to come up, and probably around 5:30, but it's still pitch black at 3:50. It speaks to me through the wall. This was a terrible idea, in my mind. When Tia and I built this building, she said, oh, I'd love to do art out here. Let's have some big, wide windows. We can get some big, wide, 6-foot wide, 4-foot tall windows that like Bigfoot could just tap on and completely shatter and just step through easily. And I was feeling so exposed, and I was panicking. I got in this panic. So, Matt, I heard it speak to me. And then I woke up completely. I was like, wait a minute. Oh, I just had this crazy dream, like it spoke to me, and then it did it again. And
while he was awake, and did you say the cats were going nuts too?
No, at this point, Boxcar was relaxed, so that made me think like Boxcar had heard it before. At any rate,
so you have to do the voice. So Matt, at this point, so after he hears the voice while he's conscious, he's texting me my phone. So anytime he's out there, I'm always like, okay, baby, no worries. Like I've got my phone on in case you need anything or whatever. So my phone is going nuts, wakes me up, because I hear ba-bing, 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 bing, and I'm looking at a text, and it's like, for the love of God, do not step outside. Can you see anything out the window right now? Do not step outside. It spoke to me. He's like text after text, and he's like panicking. I'm actually surprised he's able to type with his thumb or what.
My hands were shaking.
Oh my gosh.
They were shaking
I was
so
really
hard.
impressed.
So I was terrified, and I at the time I found a video that sounded like very similar to this. I haven't been able to find it since. I should have bookmarked it, or maybe it's been, I don't know, maybe not found on YouTube. I haven't found a video that sounds like this. What it sounded like to me is it sounds like the Tasmanian devil from the cartoons, the Looney Tunes. And it also sounded like a person talking, but instead of like if you took like a 10th grader or something that's really struggling with English, and like they say, and like between every word is like, that's kind of normal in English, kind of the way we're taught it. If you replace that with a growl, that's exactly what this sounded like. and I'm gonna see if I can do it. I'm psyching myself out. I'm getting back in the mood.
You could do it. You do it better than I do.
I don't know how that came across, but it's pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty good, I would say.
It was like very, very fast gibberish with like a growling constant undertone on the whole thing. And I thought at the time, oh my gosh, it's going to kill me. It's upset. And it sounded like something the size of a horse was making this voice. It was super deep. I don't really remember how deep it was. I just remember at the time thinking like, you'd have to be the size of a horse to be able to talk like this. And I was scared to death. And I thought, oh my gosh, terrifying. So I haven't heard any YouTube videos like that. People talk about the samurai chatter.
No, the Sierra recordings.
I don't think that sounds quite the same. There's a gibberish chatter, but there's not the growling. I don't know.
Okay.
So maybe the growling made me think it was angry.
Like, who out here has a gallon-sized bladder? It's marking my territory.
I'm not trying to take anything away from your experience. I'm just speaking open-minded here. Why do you think it was talking to you?
Yeah, so this comes to like kind of my worldview about all this, and from just reading all sorts of esoteric stuff, just throwing a lot of information into and just letting my intuition just sit with everything. And I think that just based on all sorts of paranormal stuff, and it's not acknowledged by our society, and it's not the norm, I believe that they are people just like we are people, and that they have some psychic gifts. And the thing is, I don't think that's unusual. I think that's normal. I think it's normal for humans too. I think we're taught not to use them. Like I know people talk about, it's very common for people to reference like, oh, I felt somebody staring at me, right?
Right.
Or if somebody goes hunting, there's a lot of people that will hunt for deer or whatever, and they teach themselves, okay, I can't just stare at the deer. I'm going to look to the left until I'm pretty much sure I got the bee on it, and then I'm going to like look at the deer and do the last little bit of aiming and shoot. Because if I just stare at the deer for like 30 seconds or 60 seconds, it's going to know I'm there and like run off. And I have tons of thoughts on this, and I don't know if they're going to. I think they'll derail the program. but I think there are a lot. I have human friends that have like psychic abilities at some level because they practice them and they pay attention to them and they nurture them and they go to school for these things and they do trainings for this and they have plant experiences or whatever to have they experience and train themselves in that. And so and if you look hard enough on the internet and in the histories, you'll find that the military had a remote viewing program for a long time. Why did they do that? Well, they were getting results, and I think we're spiritual beings and I think telepathy and mind reading and whatnot is something that can be taught. I think dowsing is related. I think there's a whole host of different things that kind of point to or suggest, hey, we have these abilities. It's natural, but we're being taught to ignore them.
And if I could add something to your
the
voice. So when he tells me this story, Matt, and he found a recording online, which I thought initially was from Sierra Nevada record? Sierra Nevada recording? It's from the 70s.
Yeah.
Okay, Sierra Sounds. So it was when he found a recording that matched what he heard and played it for me. I was like, oh my gosh, babe, I'm surprised you didn't crap your pants. Like, I don't know if I could have mustered up enough motor control to like text. He's like, that's what it sounded like. I'm like, wow, that's crazy. And that happens to be the darkest corner of the whole property is back there. There's no lights, there's no power, nothing. And all this stuff always happens when there's no moon out. And when he told me this and played it for him, like, what's nuts is I've heard that before. And it's always between like around 2 to 3 a.m. And I would hear it through the bedroom wall this was before he moved in with me. I used to hear pacing along that side of the fence, that voice, like that, kind of loud Tasmanian devil, like gibberish voice pacing along that fence line. And I told myself, oh, that's just my neighbor who's probably 3 sheets to the wind. And then as we got closer to my neighbor, we were doing a campfire in one of our yards one night, and we were talking, and I think, we had some adult beverages. There were a couple of beers and stuff were passed around. He was like, oh, no, thanks, I don't drink. And I'm like, what? You don't? And he's like, no, I can't. He had some kidney ailments years back, and he's never been a drinker. And I'm like, wait a minute. So then Edward and I had to like get together on our notes. I'm like, what in the world was that? So I had been hearing that for years before Edward ever moved in with me.
Yeah, she told this to me, and I think I've heard. I mean, I know I've heard. I don't remember where, but I've heard people tell stories of like women when they're living by themselves. Sometimes a male will come around and be a little interested, and maybe even just to let them know, hey, you're safe here.
Right.
You know, just kind of talk to them or whatever. But I don't know what was going on there.
The reason I asked about why you thought it was talking to you specifically is just trying to process the situation. Usually this type of behavior is associated with what we would call teenagers, Bigfoot teenagers. And they're usually not alone whenever they do this sort of thing. There's usually more than one. And there's been quite a few reports of others coming along, like mature adults, and kind of scolding the teenagers or telling them like, hey, you're too close, and like the type of vocalization that you were doing that you heard that night. I was just wondering if it might have been a situation where one was talking to another one or scolding another one for, you know, tapping on the roof and messing with you, or, you know, just something along those lines. But like I said, it's just, I don't know. I was just wanting to kind of get your thoughts on it.
Oh, you know what? That was an early thought I had. Like, actually, in the moment, I'm glad you asked that question. In the moment, I thought, I was like hyperventilating and thinking like, oh, they've been tapping on the house all night, trying to see if I'll like peek out. Like, right. From where, so that we have curtains in there, but they don't close completely. So there were gaps on both sides of the house where they could be peeking in at me. I mean,
Edward, I hate to break the news to you, but they've been watching you for a long time before you.
Yeah, okay.
Like, they know you. You may not know them, but they knew you at this point.
Right. So I at least in the moment, I was telling myself like, don't move. Maybe they don't know you're here. But they had been tapping right next to my head, like a foot away from my head, a couple times too. So I was trying to convince myself like, they don't know you're here. They're just talking to each other.
Yeah.
But I don't believe that in hindsight. It could have been one talking to the youngsters and telling them, hey, stop teasing that guy. In the fantasy of my mind, there's like a family, and I think the first time I encountered them and they kind of ran past me, I think that was probably the kids. Like I startled them and they ran off in two different directions.
Right.
And it's kind of like what teenager can do an Olympian jump over a 5-foot no-climb fence and like not flip over into the dirt like, in the dark.
I didn't think about that at the time, and like I wondered about that for the longest time because we do get javelina here, but like I cannot imagine that I heard it. I mean, I heard a person running. There's a certain cadence to it, and the pigs don't do the same. Like they have a shuffle.
And you hear a hoof too.
Yeah, totally.
Gallop.
So whoever this was able to run perfectly on, you know, slightly rocky soil in pitch black.
And clear a 5-foot fence. Both of them. Yeah. You said both of them.
The other one ran down the other side of the house. I don't know where it went.
Oh, okay.
At any rate. So that was the talk. That was the voice incident. And for the longest time, I would tell this story kind of to friends occasionally at social gatherings. I told my coworkers, and they all thought they never mentioned it again.
Great icebreaker, Edward.
Yeah, they just politely never mention it again. And they're like, okay. And whenever I would tell the story, I would say, yeah, I'm not sure if it was angry or not, but I kind of assume it was angry at me. And I told the story about it could have been about a year ago. It was about a year ago at like Thanksgiving. And a woman that was there that I didn't know very well, I'd met her literally twice, kind of a friend of a friend, and I told it, and she heard it, and she kind of responded. She was fun to talk to. She, you know, I don't know how to describe this. This person says that they have psychic abilities, okay, and I'm cool with that. She's not the only person I know who would say that about themselves, and so that was about a year ago, and then I want to say in March or April of this year. So we're going back like 7 or 8 months. Tia had gone out shopping with a friend, and they had bought some walkie-talkies that said on them, "Hey, this you can talk for 40 miles or for up to 42 miles." And up to is like, I think, the important word,
Right.
that should be.
They're FRS. Yeah, they're bubble pack.
So I remember. So they had a fun time. Then I went and picked her up and brought her home, and she was driving and trying to talk to. "Hey, Raoul, can you hear me? Can you hear me?" And like literally, we barely leave his road, like 100 yards from his house. We can't hear him anymore. So he's like they're trying to play with their walkie-talkies. Anyways, we take this walkie-talkie home. Doesn't work hardly, and we just leave it on, and I forget about it. So that's I think that was a Friday night. So no, that was a Saturday night. And then so Sunday morning I'm sleeping in, and at like 7 o'clock in the morning I hear like the radio. We left it on and charging kind of in near where I sleep, and it said "hi" at like 7 o'clock in the morning.
Not like that though. It was like "hi."
That's right. She's right.
Yeah.
It was kind of a choppy "hi,"
like
and
a deep choppy "hi."
I kind of had the sense like maybe two people were talking, and just for a second, at the moment I thought, oh, there's just some cross chatter. Two people are talking, and like maybe they're on the same channel and they're pretty far away, and it just picked up a tiny bit of a stray radio wave.
Right.
No problem. I went back to sleep, and then like 30 minutes later, I started getting a string of texts from that woman that I'd met at the Thanksgiving party who is psychic, and she said. Like we had never texted. Like I got her number on my phone and she got mine because we had some common interest. It had something to do with like fringy things, like it's like psychic stuff. That's cool. I wanted to get to know her. We hit it off at the party. This is a potential friend. Let me get your number. So she had my number, and so my phone starts going off. She'd never texted me before, and she was like, "Hey, I don't know how to explain this, but I'm getting this message." I should have gotten my phone out and looked at this up, and I haven't looked at it in a while. But the gist was, out of nowhere that morning, she said, I'm getting a message from your hairy friends. She said, referencing that like Thanksgiving or Christmas meal where I'd met her. And she said they wanted to clarify that when they spoke to you, it was not in anger. And she said, I'm getting the sense that you've got a big hairy friend.
And she specifically referenced that they say hello.
They say hello. Yeah. So and so this was literally the radio in the room had the walkie-talkie had spurted life and said hi, and then 30 minutes later I start getting these texts from her, and it felt like a confirmation, and it felt very interesting. But I felt like I don't have an answer for that. I've never heard of anybody else with a story like that. This is what happened, and it feels like they're trying to say, hey, we weren't mad at you. Sorry, we freaked you out. Get some more of those dove blocks.
Yeah, they like the seed blocks a lot. Which is fun.
We haven't. I don't know if it was like conscious or not. I haven't bought one since.
Right. Well, and now Matt, that was the last time he stayed in the casino.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really blame you for that.
So that's my story. I think that's pretty much. And we have a couple of. I'll tell one or two more real quick ones. Oh, I forgot the most important one.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a Chevy Volt, and I park it at the front of the property, or at least I did at the time. I don't remember when this was. This had to be a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. So this was before the high, that thing that happened this year in the psychic communication, but this was after the hello through the wall story from 2019 in February. So this is probably 2019 or 2020, and I've got the car charging on the front pad in the front of the house, and we've got a kind of a garage there that we built the garage, so it had to be then. So let's say 2020, and I'm just thinking about all these things, Matt. They're all swimming through my head, and like Bigfoot and blah, blah, blah. And I've heard stories about Bigfoot being invisible, and I'm pondering, how can they even be here? We've got a bunch of rabbits. Is that enough to live on? Coyotes live here. And I remember that Kumbo said that if there's, coyotes can be supported in the environment, then Bigfoot can be supported. So I'm thinking through all these things and just trying to weigh and just deliberate all these things. And I have this very strong feeling like, you know what? I had heard some stories about Bigfoot cloaking and being invisible. And I said, you know what? That kind of makes sense, because I've actually encountered this in a completely different media that has nothing to do with Bigfoot, about like spiritual beings when they're maybe a higher level of development than we are. They can cloak themselves with respect to us so that they're not bothering us. That we're doing our evolution and they're doing their thing, but they just hide themselves from us so that they're not interfering. Because that would affect our evolution, sort of like a Star Trek when Star Trek lands at a planet, they're like, oh, we don't want to interfere in their civilization.
Right.
So I was reading some esoteric, fringy stuff on that subject, and I thought, oh, it makes sense then that they would be invisible, and so you couldn't see them. Maybe they're hypnotizing you or whatever. They have some control over that. And I just was standing by my car, and I thought, oh, so there could be one right here. And exactly as I thought that, a big branch on do you know what an ironwood tree is?
Yeah.
An ironwood tree out here in Arizona. Tia told me that you can break a chainsaw trying to cut through an ironwood tree. And this was an ironwood tree, a fresh limb, broke at about 12 feet up, 35 feet from me. There is nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to stand. There's like a bunch of like spiny bushes, and then there's like a big ironwood branch like 12 feet in the air above it. And the branch snapped, a healthy branch, right as I thought that.
No wind, Matt. No wind at all. Bright sunny day right in front of him.
And I was just like, oh. And then I remembered, Boxcar, like getting freaked out and looking at Tia saying, oh, you shouldn't be wearing the hat. Like the hat is making him nervous. I just remembered, oh my gosh, maybe there was an invisible Bigfoot like right there, And so, Matt, I have an invisible Bigfoot buddy. I don't know his name yet, but he's called me through a friend, through a bro, and someday when I'm not so scared, maybe I'll meet him. But he's around, and I don't know. I just, in the way I was thinking through it, oh, Bigfoot can be invisible. He could be like right here, right now. I literally thought it, and then like a second later, not even 2 seconds, like perfectly timed, the branch breaks. I turn around and I look. I'm like, oh, yeah. Oh, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Well, and then for me, it was kind of like, oh, well, if he wanted to hurt me, or if we didn't have a copacetic relationship, he's in charge of this. He could hurt me if he wanted to. He doesn't want to hurt me. And I thought, oh, I see. He wants to communicate, and he is allowed to communicate a little bit indirectly, but probably in some way that's not interfering with my free will. You know what I mean? I think so. Here's the thought I have, Matt, is how many times do you have someone come on your show and it's like they saw a Bigfoot at the side of the road, like literally not threatening them, they just glimpsed it and walked into the trees, and they're traumatized for decades.
Yeah.
Afraid to tell other people, socially isolated. They've been to therapy. That we are very emotionally fragile species, or at least the way we're raised or taught or raised up to be just super fragile where it comes to this. Like if I saw, if I don't know, whatever it might be, an alien or a Sasquatch or a dogman, people will see these beings terrified and emotionally damaged. And I think like this guy or this family is like, just what do you have to do? Oh, you have to hide yourself around the humans, otherwise they'll freak out and they'll be emotionally damaged, like emotionally injured. That's how fragile they are. So that's kind of the way I see it, is like, oh, they're being very courteous. They're going the extra mile to like, I mean, they're our neighbors. We call them the neighbors.
Well, the neighbors, yeah.
They're our neighbors, and they're good neighbors. Like they're trying not to freak us out, and they know how fragile we are.
And Matt, that next morning, Edward took me out to see this limb that had broken, and I was very familiar with the tree. This tree has been there as long as I bought the place in 2011. So this tree is an old tree, and this limb was like 3 inches thick, ironwood. Wow. And I know that I've had neighbors like break their chainsaws on cutting ironwood before, and it's like there was absolutely no wind that day, and for this to just snap right when he's like, oh, there could be one right here right now, and snapped. It's like, what the freak? And it was what's crazy was it was still hanging. It was like hanging there, so you could. It's not like it tore off the tree and fell. It was hanging there after it had snapped itself off the tree.
Yeah, still there.
Yeah, I don't really have an explanation for that. I mean,
So again, circumstantial. It's just timing, but I just don't feel like that's possible. I think it's a clear message, and that's how it feels to me.
Right. No, I mean, if I had experienced that situation, I would probably be sitting exactly where you're at mentally. There's a lot of things in your story and Tia's story, again, that are like firing off little memories of my own and things I've experienced and things I've heard other people talk about. And it's really interesting. I I would definitely just enjoy the ride and stay in the same mindset that you're in.
Yeah.
One of the things that you said in the email that really stood out to me was about people kind of setting themselves up for the type of experience they would have, and being open to those type of experiences might result in having those sorts of encounters, as opposed to a person who's just dead set that these are just flesh and blood and just another animal, some sort of undiscovered primate, that might ultimately lead them to have that kind of encounter where they wouldn't experience the other things. And I thought that was a really interesting concept.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people, I think I've heard this on your show a lot, where people will say, like, if you've seen one, then you'll see them, you know?
Yeah.
And there's some element to it, could be just like, oh, you just need to learn how to spot them. But I think the other aspect is, like, when you've seen them and they know you haven't freaked out, then they're like, okay, I can let this guy see me. He's not going to freak out, you know? And I'm going to slowly accustom him to seeing me. You know, I think they know what we're thinking. This universe we're in, I feel, is a universe of consciousness. Well, I have a lot of reasons for thinking that, and that's a whole
other show.
But I think this is a conscious universe, and I think that, like, psychic abilities, I think it's natural. I believe in the Dewey Larson physics. Like, there's a lot of stuff that we think that is paranormal, and it's really just, these are things that are totally natural, that fit with the universe we're in, but our science is trying to, our science has built a very small box for us to stand in, and has deceived us, and, like, if some kid is having psychic experiences and is kind of, like, more sensitive than the rest, well, they take that kid, put him on medications. A generation or two ago, they would have, put him in a home, kept him away from other people, and jammed ice picks in his noggin. You know what I mean? Just horrible stuff.
From a very early age, I have definitely believed in at least part of the population having an ability to tap into some sort of psychic abilities on occasion. And I totally agree that it's most likely a scenario where everybody has the ability, but not everybody can tap into it or knows how to tap into it or even thinks about tapping into it. I don't know if it's controlled by environment or outside forces somehow, but I definitely believe that it exists. And therefore, if these things are in fact a type of person, a type of people like I believe they are, then it is not far-fetched at all to think that at least some of them would also have some of those abilities on some level. And so I don't think it's crazy at all. I don't think any of it's crazy.
That's kind of where I land with it. And there's so much research, and this is getting kind of away from the topic, but just even in terms of, like, they've done psychological like experiments. There are science experiments you can do on this sort of thing, and they've discovered that like the first day you do a crossword puzzle, like you put it in the New York Times, it's the first day it's seen, like, it takes a certain amount of time on average for people to break it. But after, like, millions of people do that crossword puzzle, like, if you give that crossword puzzle new to somebody, like, a week later, they answer all the questions faster on average.
Wow. And
it's on some level, the crossword puzzle answers have kind of gone into the collective consciousness, and it's, like, available to you on some level. I think it's called, like, the 100th monkey effect.
Oh, that's right, the 100th monkey.
And there's other things like that, like measurable ways in which we can see that humans are psychically, we're subconsciously connected to one another. And I think it's a spiritual teaching too. Like, I didn't learn this from anybody else. This is something I came to myself after a lot of other spiritual readings. And gosh, I know I'm going to get the quote wrong, and this is so important to me, and so it's super embarrassing if I get this wrong. But, like, Jesus, I think, said, like, love one another. Gosh, I am saying
love thy neighbor as thyself.
Yes, love thy neighbor as thyself, right? And I've heard that my whole life since I was a kid. My mother was a minister. My brother's a pastor. Very religious family. Love thy neighbor as thyself. They could have just said, love your neighbor a lot. Like, right. or love people, They said, love your neighbor as yourself. And I think the reason why I came to, like, much later in life, and I kind of connected this, there is there's a book of esoteric teachings called the Raw Materials, which are basically teach that we are all one mind that has, like, been fragmented to make life interesting. And so you don't know you're a part of the same mind, but there's evidence, like at some deep levels, like that 100th monkey effect or whatever. I think the message is love your neighbor as yourself, like not love your neighbor in the same way that you want to be loved. Love your neighbor by consciously recognizing that person is you. That person is a fractal of you. It's best for you that there are good outcomes for your neighbor. It's best for you to love everybody and look for good outcomes for everybody because they are all you. You are in them, they are in you. Collectively, you're having this experience of multiplicity, but we really are some sort of, on some level, a collective consciousness, or we share a collective consciousness. So that's like kind of where my spirituality comes from, because, you know, you can translate Christian ethics very easily into, like, it translates very easily, I guess you could say. And so I try to live a very ethical life, but by trying to see myself in other people in a very literal sense, like recognizing, hey, that person over there that's doing these stupid things and hurting themselves, it would be good if I could help that person and help them not be hurting themselves because that person is me on some level. I don't know if that's true, but that's the way I'm living.
There's a lot of people that believe that these creatures, these beings, whatever you want to call them, can read people's kind of just their spirit, their being. It goes beyond just their intent, but as humans, we would most likely understand it as intent. But, you know, I mean, we have the same ability. Like, if you meet someone, sometimes we're caught off guard by the person and we come to the realization that they're not anything like we thought they were. But for the most part, at least some of us are pretty good judges of character and can kind of tell what kind of a person someone is, you know, by observing them and talking to them a little bit. And there's a belief that these creatures can look at a person and see straight into their soul and tell exactly what kind of person they are, and that it takes a certain kind of person for them to have a relationship with them or reveal themselves to them on a different level than, no offense, Tia, but them crossing the road in front of a car, for instance. And I'm not saying that Tia is a bad person or that couldn't have one of those experiences. I'm just saying, you know, a lot of things can be factored into the idea of why you would have the type of encounters that you've had. Edward.
Yeah, I think that could be true. And like Tia puts it this way sometimes, like very similar to what you're saying. Like, how often have you heard somebody say, "Oh, I'm sure glad I didn't trust my gut feeling just then. You know, I had a gut feeling about this person. I'm so glad I ignored it." You know,
right?
I think we do have a deep instinct, like sometimes like a primitive psychic response, like to people or situations. And I've never heard anybody say, "I'm glad I didn't follow my gut feeling." You know?
Yeah.
And it's interesting, Tia, that you had your experience, and then somehow you end up in this relationship with this guy, and now he's had these experiences.
Yeah.
We're happy, we're enjoying ourselves, and we've got neighbors. And Tia's got a little list here, and she keeps underlining this one. We have a neighbor down the way who probably has encountered this invisible friend as well, because he was the very, very smallest, narrowest thumbnail sketch of a situation. So he had a dove block out too, and one time he was out hanging near the dove block and he was moving it or something like that, and he just got this like kind of freaky sensation, like someone was really staring at him with intent,
like dread. He said he felt like he was, not that he felt anger, like he wasn't feeling someone's anger at him, he just felt a presence that could like break him in half, you know what I mean, like just a very powerful presence looming over him. And he thought, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die right now. And it was the middle of the day, absolute middle of the day. He heard a grunt and like didn't see anything at all, and all he was doing was fussing with a seed block in his front yard. And then we were telling him, Edward's telling him the dinner table, like his story, and like you could see Jim's eyes get all big and like, oh my gosh.
So yeah, It's when you put the love blocks out there, they're not yours anymore. You've given a gift.
Right.
Hands off the dove block.
Yeah.
Right. And Matt, you'll appreciate this. I was talking when I have these kind of talks with friends and stuff, and I try to encourage them, like, to don't be afraid. Like, don't be fearful. There's so many wonderful different walks of life around us that we are not even aware of, and that, being fearful will just, put the wool over your eyes. You don't get any closer to reality when you're in the mode of fear. But I was talking to a couple of friends, and I was explaining to them, and I said, what's great is nowadays, like, people are talking more and more about cryptids or about esoteric fringe, and they're a lot more open to it nowadays. And it's slow. It's very slow, but it's happening, and it's a beautiful awakening.
If you've encountered something you can't explain, whether it be Bigfoot, aliens, ghosts, or whatever, send me an email at bigfootcrossroads@gmail.com. If you get a chance, check out the website, bigfootcrossroads.com. You can find links to the social media, merchandise, past episodes, everything you need all in one place. And until next time, remember, there's something in the woods.